design systems. If we design our ER diagram based on the design principles, we'll get the ER diagram will reflect impersonal requirement truly and completely, and lead us constitute a good design and avoid unusual avoid usual problems. And there are four basic main design principles. Faithfulness, avoiding redundancy, simplicity counts, and picking the right kind of elements. Faithfulness it means that the design should be faithful to the specification. ER relations, entity set relationships and attributes should reflect realities. It's the most basic principles. If we controlling faithfulness, will get useless and harmful design. And redundancy means that the same thing in two or more different ways. We say it two or more different ways. Redundancy will waste space and encourage inconsistency. And now let's look at this example. Mm, In this example, movie, there is a relationship between movies and studios. It means that the relationship is a studio owns uh, movies, and this is a many one relationship. So it means that for a movie, there is only one studio. Uh, a movie is owned by only one studio, and a studio uh, can own many movies. Okay, and this design gives the address of each studio exactly once. This is a good design. But now let's to look at this design. In this design, we'll find the two facts of we'll find the fact twice the factor of who own a movie. Here, studio as an attribute of movies, so it means the studio who owned the movie and this relation this relation. So this design states the studio of a movie twice as an attribute and as a related entity. So there is redundancy. So there is redundancy here. There is redundancy here. Okay. Sometimes maybe you'll get this you'll find this design. There is no entity set of studio, and studio name and studio address all both are as uh, attributes of movies, and this design is also a bad design because this design repeats the studio's address once for each movie and loses the address if there are temporarily no movies for a studio. So it's not a good design. Okay, and sometimes we'll face the choice of entity set or attribute and will give the give the rules of how to when we'll choose attribute as attribute and when we'll choose it as the entity set. And the third principle is simplicity counts. Simplicity count is used to avoid introducing more elements into your design than are absolutely necessary. This is an example. We'll find these two entity set. In fact, holding is unnecessary in the entity set. We can combine it and so if we find in a ER diagram, there is a one-one relationship between two entity sets which have same keys. We should consider we consider uniting them. So we unit these two together. You just one movies is okay. Movies and then choose. It's unnecessary. Okay, it's simply a con. It simply cons. And the last principle is picking the right kind of element. Sometimes we have options regarding the type of design element used to represent a real-world concept. What is right? Right means more reasonable, more natural, simple, closer to a requirement. For example, to a student. For example, to a student, uh, we choose student ID. There are attributes student ID, ID number, and so on. Student ID can be the primary key. You can choose student ID as the primary key, and ID number is also a key. Okay, which one is better? I think sometimes we'll find in a for a student it means for a student the student ID is better. Sometimes student ID better, and um, and in the former uh, example of of movie and studio, and we find the studio as a studio as an entity set is better than a studio as an attribute of um, movies. So uh, an attribute or an entity set. If someone has more information associated with it than just its names, it probably needs to be an entity set. In the former example, um, the studio had two attributes, name and address So studio as an entity set is better. And but if it has only its name to contribute to the design, then it probably be better made an attribute. For example, if the studio we just need store the name of studio in the database, then the studio as an entity set an attribute is better. Don't use an entity set when an attribute will do. If we use like this, it's redundancy. Okay, let's look at the example. In this example, um, this ER diagram for a bank database involving customers and accounts. Since accounts may have several, since customers may have several accounts, and accounts may be held jointly by several customers, with associated with each customer an account set. And accounts are member of one or more account sets. Oh, then here we'll find, let's look at this ER diagram. What design rules are avoided? Firstly, let's look at this one. Okay, this is a many-one relationship. And for an entity set, there is only one address, only one attribute address. So address need not to be an entity set. Uh, address as an attribute is better. So we'll pick the right element. Okay, now let's look at this two attribute entity set. This two entity set, there is a one relationship between these two entity set, and the customer the name. If the name is the key of the customer, then for the account set name is also the key for the account set. Then it's not necessary. Account sets is not necessary. We are united customer name. So we'll get a relation. Uh, it avoids simplicity counts rule, and now then we'll get an ER diagram like this: customer name, address, address, okay, and balance. Now it is a good design.